Yeah, I'm Johnny. I'm a polysubstance dependent diagnosed for Oxycontin as well as Spice.
Okay, so what made you try narcotics in the first place?
The first thing that made me try narcotics was out of pure curiosity when I was around 7th grade, so about 12 years old. Started drinking at 12. A lot of people started with marijuana. With me and my buddies started getting into just the prescriptions right away. Mostly the tranquilizers like Ambien, a lot of that shit. Took a lot of amphetamines like Adderall, Vyvanse, and then it really wasn't until about 8th grade we got started into smoking whatever we get our hands on.
How long would you say you were addicted?
You can't really give a time frame of when you were addicted, because if you say you're not addicted anymore, you weren't really an addict, since an addict just goes into recovery. I'd probably say I used recreationally for about 1.5 years, and then it was probably summer going into 9th grade where I could have been medically diagnosed for addiction to at least one substance.
Okay. Was there any other addictions along with the narcotics addiction?
I would say there was any other addictions that formed with the narcotics. I definitely say there was attitude and behaviors that fed along with the addiction process of narcotics. A lot of criminal behavior, as well as a lot of criminal behavior that included drug distribution, transportation of drugs, drug manufacturing, and just a lot of, I guess, above average violent tendencies for a kid that age. So.
What was your wake-up call to get clean?
My wake-up call. So when I was in 10th grade, they found my best friend after he'd been missing for a few months, just dead, just gone. And that kind of kicked me in the right direction, but it probably wasn't until a few months later my dad found me in the bottom of a stairwell, passed out just off a drug overdose, and he took me in, got me back awake, and he finally, he was talking to me, he was like, I think you need help, and I finally agreed. That was my first thing when I realized I needed help. After that, I went to a program for a few months after that, the little stairwell incident. Was clean for about 3 weeks once I was released, and then relapsed after basically some old acquaintances kicked the living hell out of me. So got jumped, and that was then I relapsed off of painkillers. Started using again super heavily. I dropped out of school, and I started just spending all my time either in Ogden or Midvale or West Valley, just with wherever my friends were heading, wherever the money was going, in whichever direction it was going. One of my best friends overdosed on heroin, and this was a kid that we would hang out together, sell drugs, talk shit, all that stuff. This is your boy. And finding out that he overdosed on heroin, just the stuff that we would dabble in and mess around with, maybe his addiction was a different substance than mine, but we'd still dabble with the same stuff. And I think knowing the fact that life was cut short, he was my age, he was 17, the fact that his life was cut short at 17 really was kind of a wake-up call for me, because I got an older brother and a little brother, all the family, and I guess it just kind of hit me hard when I finally realized that maybe my actions weren't going to completely influence only me, but if I was to overdose and die, that the actions would kind of have a negative backlash on everybody that was associated with me. So that was my wake-up call.
So what was your treatment plan as far as getting clean?
Well, my treatment plan was I was shipped away for 9 months into a facility where I had no contact with the outside world. Everything was locked down. There was cameras and voice monitoring in every room, so you couldn't talk any discreet conversations. Strip searched, I'd probably say on average we were strip searched twice a month, but we were strip searched every time we left the facility, every time we got back from the facility. They didn't want Not sure why they strip search us on the way out. Like, what could we get out of there? Like, try to trade a muffin for some shit. But on the way in, we were strip searched, and that was kind of it for about 9 months. It was just strip search, full lockdown, no privacy. When I finally did get out, it was kind of the realization of all my friends doing the same thing. Like, we buried another one of my friends about 4 months after I was released. So it's not really like my treatment plan had all this structure to it. It was kind of the lack of freedom that was the realization that I didn't want to go back to that life and have to go through that process again. And I got lucky with 9 months. If I was to continue down that route, it wouldn't have been, southern Utah. I would have been point of the mountain for 9 years, and didn't really want to go down that road.
So what is your message to like young teens or young adults about addiction?
My message to young teens and young adults about addiction. I guess the one thing that I could say from my personal experience is realize what you're doing before you actually start doing it, because before you know it, you're in too deep. There's nowhere to run, hide, there's nowhere to go. That's your life. This is coming from somebody who couldn't function properly without taking a near lethal dose of Oxycontin or any form of synthetic, or figure out what you're doing wrong before it's too late. Because I got lucky that I'm here. I got lucky I'm clean. I got lucky I'm still alive. I can't say that for a majority of my friends.
My name's Lisa, and I'd like to share my story today in hopes that I might help someone like myself to avoid some of the pain that I've suffered these past few years. The pain that I'm talking about is the demons of drug addiction. I want to share what I have found to be the truth about drugs. The truth that I never felt like I got from Red Ribbon Week or my health classes, church, or anyone in my life. I was told to say no to drugs before I even had a clue what drugs were. And so all along the question played in the back of my head of what are they and why can't I? I grew up in Provo, Utah, arguably the most conservative city in the United States. My family consists of my parents, my 2 older brothers, and I. I grew up attending the Mormon church every Sunday and never got into much trouble growing up. I have a Japanese mother and an American father who raised me well. I practiced piano, studied Japanese, and did my homework every day before I went out to play, and was home not a minute after 6 o'clock to eat dinner with my family. In middle school, as many kids transitioning into teenagers do, I began trying to form my own identity apart from my parents. I stopped going to church and outwardly rebelled against my parents. The summer after 8th grade was the first time I ever tried smoking pot. My boyfriend at the time smoked with his friends, and when I found out, I insisted on trying it. I didn't even get high, and I got in trouble for it after my mom read my journal. I decided smoking weed must not be all that great. My sophomore year, amongst all my extracurricular school activities, I began a drug-free club. The club consisted of myself and my boyfriend, whom I'd forced to be in the club with me. Made a great yearbook picture. My junior year, my boyfriend and I had broken up, and I had made some new friends. I'm not sure where it stemmed from, but it seemed like a mutual decision that the 3 of us wanted to try smoking weed. We began hanging out with some of the notorious potheads at our school. This time smoking weed was a blast with my friends, and we began drinking and partying every weekend. I skipped class a few times a week, smoking weed, but I still maintained my grades. My senior year, I was busted at school with a half ounce of weed I was selling. And the charges were dropped, and I still graduated my high school with a 3.9 GPA and high honors. The truth I believed at this point had become that drugs are awesome and I should always say yes to drugs. Marijuana, mushrooms, acid, and ecstasy. They were all so much fun despite minor hangovers and petty court fines. I became somewhat resentful that I'd ever believed that drugs were bad and swore to make up for all the lost fun. When heroin was introduced to me, I knew nothing of what it was but followed directions of how to smoke it off the tin. It made me feel nauseous and I could hardly stand up. I didn't like it. A few days later, I began dating the guy who shot up heroin. He used me for money to buy it and was constantly getting more. I figured I must have just done it the wrong way when I had tried it, and that I needed to try shooting it up. My boyfriend shot me up for the first time, and I was instantly in love. With the heroin, I mean, not with him. But that feeling, the best way I can describe it is like being wrapped in a soft, warm blanket after a lifetime of bitter cold. I can't really say if being a drug addict was something inside of me to begin with, or if it's something that I became over the circumstances, but it happened and I didn't even see it coming. Now I'll tell you the truth that I found out too late. That truth is that there's a line between recreational drug use and drug addiction. The terrifying part is that no one knows where that line is until they've crossed it. And returning to recreational drug use after drug addiction is most likely not an option any longer due to the inability to stop, to incarceration, or to death. Looking back, it's clear to me the moment I crossed that line into drug addiction was the first injection of heroin. Drug addiction to me is the inability to say no to a drug. Heroin immediately became a daily necessity for me, for that cold that would come back after the feeling of warmth was more bitter than ever. A physical dependency formed within a week, and I began seeking new ways to obtain the drug. In February of 2013 was when I first used heroin, and 2.5 months later was my first overdose that sent me to the hospital. It happened at my parents' house, and I'd be dead had my brother not heard my head slam against the bathroom wall. I began dating one of the bigger heroin dealers in the county and stood close by his side. I began using meth with him as well. We drove up to Salt Lake City every day to pick up quantity from the Mexicans and came back to Utah County to triple our profit. But the money would only go back into buying more drugs. I sold with them for about 6 more months before our house was raided by major crimes. I was put on an APMP probation from that incident, but even when a probation officer stopping by my house, drug treatment classes, and multiple drug tests each week, I could not stop using. The day I graduated treatment after 3 months of faking drug tests, I overdosed in my grandparents' minivan parked at a gas station. I was awakened by a civilian shaking me. I drove away before he could call the cops. I drove about 30 miles down the freeway in and out of consciousness, unaware of the police following me. I was booked into the county jail again. I had lost 50 pounds in the past year and my body was covered in bruises and track marks. 6 months in jail gave me some time to think. I thought for the first time that I might have a problem with drugs. Out of the 23 felonies I'd picked up within the past year, I pled guilty to 9 of them. I was accepted into drug court, a rigorous probation program for high-risk, high-need users. I swore that I would never use again. But a month out of jail and still on ankle monitor, I was smoking weed, shooting up bath salts, and of course, heroin. After some more jail time, I was released into an inpatient rehab, which I secretly continued my drug use and eventually ran away from. I ran from my felonies and from the courts, from my family and everything or anyone I ever cared about. After overdosing 3 times in the span of 2.5 weeks, I realized I either needed to die or turn myself in to face a prison sentence. I took the route which scared me more, which was turning myself into the courts. It was that surrender that saved my life. I've been clean ever since. I went to another inpatient rehab for 3 months and continue to attend treatment today. Every day I'm cleaning up the wreckage I created while in my drug addiction, financially, legally, and in my relationships with others. So that I've learned is why drugs are bad. I just wish it hadn't taken me 17 arrests, 7 overdoses, 358 days in jail, 9 felonies, and thousands upon thousands of fines, losing my soul and breaking the hearts of all those who ever cared about me. But now I know to say no to drugs.